The AI integrations are sort of table stakes for these kind of products now. I think you start to stand out if you don't have something. I think what's more interesting to hear about is the problems that people are solving with this, right? How are scenarios being made more efficient? How are we helping people to get stuff done, answering those kind of time and budget challenges that people are genuinely dealing with at the moment? I think that's where the interest will be. What's missing for me, though, still is, some kind of hugely impactful wow moment in this industry. And I feel like maybe we'll see that in the next couple of years.
The focus has been even like now on the technology. And the one thing that we shouldn't forget is that challenges that people have in the past, they're still there, right? So the challenges before AI, they still remain. Fresh perspectives again, David.
Nice.
I don't have my clipboard with me this time.
It's a small portable replacement.
Yes, that's all what I got. The reason actually is because I am in London once again for very good reasons. And yes, so that's the setup I have, and very nice view.
Yes,
it's raining here, which is I think it's good. It belongs to the experience of visiting London.
Yeah,
so all of that happening.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm not in London. I am some miles south of London. And, we were saying earlier that it's, I think the first bit of planning that we were doing about doing this podcast series, I was in Nuremberg with you, and here we are last episode, and you're in London.
Yes, it's a bit of a change, but well, it's still the same people. The topic is still intranets and SharePoint as I haven't changed, which is great. And it's a special episode this time, isn't it?
Our final episode of season 1. I feel like I'm in Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something.
Yeah, it feels. But it's not coming to an end, right? We have more to come. We'll talk more about that in the end of this episode.
So I'm Dave Bowman, product director for Fresh Intranet.
I'm Jarbas host, the senior product manager for Fresh.
All right. So we're going to do just a bit of a summary as to how we've got on over the last, is it 12 episodes?
12 episodes.
Wonderful. What was your favorite?
We had at the beginning of this year, the recording on the trends and predictions for 2025, where we talked about Viva Engage, kind of increasing its visibility across Microsoft 365 and improving, SharePoint going, web publishing, email, beautiful SharePoint, and email kind of not disappearing. There's a lot of about discussions about emails and that kind of not changing. So email can still present as part of comms. And AI, I think the AI part was really nice. And I always have this one thing in mind that you mentioned there, right? So AI kind of being transformational, but like not with all letters capitalized, right? And I always keep that in mind. And I think when I see something that's AI related, that comes kind of back. Is that kind of aligned still? So that was my favorite one. What was your favorite one?
Yeah, I think similarly. It sounds sort of big-headed to say, right? I do end up listening to the episodes, but I've done a lot of traveling. Sometimes the episodes come on the, kind of next episode on the podcast. And I did. It sounds weird to say. I enjoyed listening back to that trends and predictions episode. I think we were having a great time that day. We'd got our act together finally on the episode.
Well, I think what I like about that episode, right? So this were kind of topics to discuss there, but it was a dialogue, right? It was a nice dialogue, both kind of contributing, which was definitely nice. We had a lot of preparation, thinking, like, of course, kind of analyzing the market, but also like thinking and like trying to draw our own conclusions based on the information we get.
And any others other than that was kind of standout for you than the trends predictions?
Yes, we had this one about search, which was a similar experience than the one about the trends and predictions. Research, like a bit of research before the episode, very good dialogue, very good flow, which makes it fun. And I think a lot of these episodes actually that we have is a lot of it's like if we would be sitting in a meeting and having a chat, which is always kind of very enjoyable. And what about you, right? So did you have like a second favorite one?
Yeah, probably joint second. I did enjoy the benefits of SharePoint one. I think there was some good items that we talked about and uncovered in that episode. I think there's probably other content that we should look into creating from the episode, because there was some good stuff in there. I also really enjoyed talking to Kai from Swoop Analytics. I always enjoy my conversations with Kai, so it was it's really nice to be able to get him on and talk to him about he's a very passionate person in terms of analytics and communications generally. So he's a really cool guy to talk about on this topic. Anything that you learned while we've been doing these episodes?
Well, yes. That I have like my own blog where I'm always like writing blog posts, and writing has been like a very common format for me, like to share my knowledge, to learn also, right? It kind of always the same aspect. You are doing some research, you are then writing that down and sharing that. And experiencing the podcast format was a bit of a challenge for me initially.
Uh,
So kind of going out of the comfort zone
Yeah.
and speaking, which like English is not my native language, as people might have noticed. Um, and and like also of course like the video, right? So kind of seeing your face more often than we are maybe used to. So I think that was like this learning aspect was great. And then of course the all of the research that we do before an episode, there's a bit of work that happens that people don't see, but like that help us deepen our knowledge in the subject. And I think that's valuable as well. So what's about you?
I feel like probably the episode that I learned the most, or personally found the most useful, was the conversation that we had with Manesh Mistry, talking about Copilot. I'd spent a lot of time reading about Copilot. I'd spent a lot of time listening to people talking about Copilot. But I hadn't really at the time moved beyond any of the basics, right? I was, Teams meeting summaries and, kind of coming back from holiday, catching up on emails, those sort of real sort of super basic use cases. But what I really liked about the episode from Manish, the takeaway for me was kind of listening to him talking about it was completely different from how I was experiencing it. So it was really useful to be able to kind of reflect on that conversation with him and the kind of prep work that we did with him in advance, and just kind of really reflect on that and start to think about having conversations with Copilot rather than kind of sort of one-shot prompts, which I think I was doing a lot of at the time. But that I think that episode was a sort of turning point for me in really using AI a lot more.
I think he brings a different perspective on how to interact with Copilot, which helps you really like get more outcome out of Copilot, which is really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think the kind of the summary on a number of these things is actually talking to people that are really passionate about their subject, and just kind of listening to the way they talk about it, really helping to reframe some of the things that, probably already in people's heads, but just kind of helping you to advance your own knowledge on these topics.
Now then, was there something you didn't like, in the podcast?
Two things.
Right.
Discovering how much I say the words, that's been troubling, particularly listening to any of these episodes back. And I've been unable to do anything about this either. Well, probably, and maybe that happens a lot more than even I noticed listening to these episodes back, because the agency that we work with do a great job of kind of editing these things down into kind of consumable chunks. I've also found sitting still really difficult. The kind of constantly being nagged about, you're moving around too much, you're leaning over the microphone. I'm making work for other people by not being able to sit still.
You have a lot of energy, right? So then, it's a challenge.
Yes. Well, hence switching to tea before the before recording these things.
Well, I think one aspect that's quite special about this format, right? So mentioning again here, so we we usually doing more at the blog post, but then the video format means you will start seeing your face more on social media. And I'm not a person who shares a lot of pictures or selfies. So that's a difference. Of course, like these video clips that come with the blog post or with the episode also kind of increase that visibility even further. And hearing like listen to the sound of my voice, I think that's also something you need to get used to. And at the beginning, it was a bit, yeah, it was strange to be honest. Was that like similar for you? Like, or was that like?
Well, look, I think I'm inclined to be a bit of a show off. It's not been as difficult for me.
That's yeah, good to hear. Something fun.
Yeah, fun. Yeah, it's been good in the last 12 episodes, and admittedly, I'm looking forward to having a little bit of a break. And then back, and we're going to talk in a little bit about what we're coming back with in the next season. So, look, I think in the last 12 episodes, I mean, September was when we kicked off planning these things. There's been a lot happening in our industry. Let's just do a quick summary on some of those things. So, Microsoft obviously being a big part of, what we do at work. I spend probably a disproportionate amount of my personal life thinking about Microsoft as well, and boring my family senseless on Microsoft related stuff. And I think there's probably a few things in here. We mentioned this already, the kind of beautiful SharePoint versus kind of the impression that people have about SharePoint in their minds is kind of, SharePoint is a web publishing platform, a bit like WordPress, lots of new flexibility and options. And I think that's great. That's something that people have been asking for a long time. But there's an element of it for me of, be careful what you wish for, right? Because you've now got the potential in SharePoint to create something that's beautiful, but it needs people that can do design work. People with those creative skills don't often know much about how SharePoint works. You've got these kind of two worlds coming together now, which is going to have good and bad outcomes and consequences. How have you found using this functionality in SharePoint?
Well, great, but I cannot take the most out of it. I mentioned that the other episode, right? So I try like to create something impressive with flexible layouts, and that didn't work, right? So it's not, I'm not used like to create good looking designs, and of course like these flexible layouts, they give you that flexibility and that options.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that you need like to practice more. I
Yeah.
was talking like to actually a client just before actually like this episode here, and she's like training 30 new content creators on the intranet, and then they were of course covering like all of the options now that you have for creating pages, create news posts in SharePoint, and like she was referring like the challenge that is there now of at some point people will maybe unintentionally or maybe intentionally give that a try, and it can come like with maybe side effects.
Yes, and I think the best guidance for people is to work out how they use this functionality in their intranet, because there is a danger that you could overdo this on the homepage, right, on all the kind of core pages in the intranet, and set yourself up for a position where every single page that you create in the intranet is now going to take you a day, and it's going to need creative input and imagery, and finding a kind of sparing use for this functionality is probably the right way to go. I think the beauty of SharePoint is that it allows you to create content really quickly, and this could introduce something that actually makes it really difficult to create content.
Yeah. Well, in any case, like, so there has been a lot of new functionalities for the SharePoint pages, and it is in general positive for the content creators out there.
Yes, as I say, it's something that people have been asking for a long time. And one sort of reflection observation for me from the M365 community conference that I went to is that a lot of the content that was on show at that event for internal communications people was really all about Viva Engage. And I felt that maybe for the first time that Microsoft had this Viva Engage platform, lots of renewed interest, as we've talked about a number of times, from the workplace shutdown and general improvements in the product. That there's maybe a Viva Engage versus SharePoint for internal comms. And I think it's great that, again, you've got loads of options, lots of things to do, but I think people will need to be very clear on how they're using one or either of those applications in their organization.
Yeah, I get the point, right? at least the way I see that, and the way I see also our clients using it, is like it's a complementary way of working, right? So you have kind of the enterprise social network, and you engage two-way communication happening there. But you just like have the intranet with your homepage, with the internet goes beyond, when we talk about SharePoint, it goes beyond just kind of communication. You have all of the aspect of resource management, document management that happens there as well. Plus employee recognition. So all of those things you can have in SharePoint, right? And so it can work together, and we see clients doing that, which I think is great.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think finding its role, finding its sweet spot in the organization needs consideration before just kind of deciding, well, Viva Engage is going to be our intranet. Let's crack on. People may have a disappointing experience there.
Right.
It's hard to leave this part of the conversation on Microsoft and kind of big things that have happened without talking about agents.
Yes, that's true.
This has really
Um,
landed since we've been recording these episodes, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Well, at the beginning, it was more AI and broader discussion around that, but it has evolved. Like technology has evolved, and in the space of Microsoft 365 Copilot, the focus now is on agents. And Microsoft's, of course, doing a great job improving the way how we can create agents programmatically, or like using Copilot Studio. New capabilities also like emerging, um, and I think this is I think a fascinating discussion, right? So, well, how will that change the way how we experience work? Like, is that really becoming the interface for the way how we interact with the business applications, the intranet, or are we going to see the scenario where we have then, well, AI, which is kind of already the case, or agents kind of embedded or infused, as you like to say, actually, in the business application itself?
Yeah, there's a kind of I've heard Satya Nadella's talked about this. I've heard Gartner talking about this, that SaaS applications are dead. These things are all going to be headless, and agents are going to be doing all the work behind the scenes to move information around, to execute workflows, to update systems, and that people will only be interacting with these kind of prompt or text-based interfaces. I think it feels dramatic, but I think the more that you understand about the power of the technologies, the more that you use these things, the more that you set them up yourself, the more that you realize actually this is a pretty good way to get stuff done, isn't it?
It is. I'm looking like forward, like to see how this evolves, right? But I don't think right now that we will change completely, like to start working with agents and kind of forget the, the applications as we have right now. I think it will be a step by step
Yeah.
thing where
Yes.
it starts with kind of the agents being embedded in with your workload.
Yeah.
And then at some point we might have this shift, the platform shift, where the interface becomes like the agents.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is kind of happening this year or next year.
No,
That's
I
my
think
opinion.
there is a big user adoption challenge, I think, that's largely unexplored. I had a private workshop that I was running with a small group of people. I was saying to them, like the beginning of the presentation, hands up who's using AI. I was talking about Microsoft Frontier Firm. Hands up who's kind of casually using AI. Everyone's kind of looking around the room and nodding. In the break, when you talk to people and say, how, give me some examples, how are you using it? What you understand pretty quickly is not everybody is using AI. Not everybody is exploring these technologies. And in fact, there is a, small number of people in the room that are actually, going beyond the basics of, one-shot prompting these interfaces, if that. And the gap between people that are using this stuff to become more efficient, to get stuff done, to create agents, to manage a team of agents, this is a pretty small number of very technically minded people still, and I think there's quite a long journey to go on before this hits mass adoption or any kind of critical mass of this technology.
I think it's a real point that you're making here. This is the reality that I'm also like experiencing when I'm talking like to people in general about AI, about agents. Then also observing that you think that some very often, right? So people have the same level of understanding that you have, and you need to be a bit careful, like really trying to understand like what is the how far are they? Because it's a personal development that you do like with AI in general, with ChatGPT, Copilot, and try and experience like the different possibilities. And not everyone's at the same level. Keeping that in mind, I think it's important.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah, and that that I think this kind of corporate adoption challenge for organizations is something that people are going to need to get on top of.
I think really spending more time like with individuals, and helping the people in the organization, right, understand the possibilities. I think
Yeah.
more training is important. The aspect of adoption, we talked about that the other day.
Yes.
And I really do believe that spending the time with the people, teaching them how to use the technology is fundamental.
I think the other kind of trend that I'm noticing, and maybe this is very specific to LinkedIn in particular, but the increase in people being snarky about AI, kind of creating this position that if you're kind of pro AI, you're a nerd, or you're using it because you're incompetent, or you don't have enough good skills to be useful, so you've got to get AI to do your work for you. That's one group, and then the other group that kind of being snarky about AI are kind of, they're the competent, authentic people. And I just, I hate this idea that we're losing nuance in this debate. Um, the people have been creating bad content for years. AI isn't introducing bad content. This is a concept that's been around for a long time. And I think we're at an important moment where people should be being encouraged to explore what this technology can do for people. And I think deriding them because M dashes are appearing in their content, or there are kind of telltale signs that people are using AI. I think this is a bad place for us to be.
Yeah, in today's environment, and like there's also like a very common way of how AI starts content. But I think we are in a discovery phase of the technology, and it's a technology that's evolving quite significantly, and it's technology that has a big impact in our life. So I think people should be encouraged to give that a try and experiment, and experiment that in like put your content out there, or use that the way how you can.
Yes, and encourage other people to do the same, right? I think li- people should be lifting each other up on this technology as we explore how this can help us all as people, as organizations. I think everyone needs to be kind of finding their role in this brave new world of technology. And then, kind of on intranets themselves, probably one of the, sounds strange to say, kind of, a pretty big event in our calendar is the launch of the Clearbox report. By the way, we won an award.
Just to mention that, right?
Yeah,
That's very true.
throwing that in there,
It feels good, like to
yeah,
keep emphasizing it.
yeah. Let's get that out of the way. Having had a chance to kind of run through that report in some level of detail now, there was no huge surprises, right? There was no like iPhone moment in the report
I like that.
this year, right? There's no kind of major vendor that's sort of slipped in under the radar that's kind of, taken over or revamping the industry. And it feels like an industry that could be ready for that kind of thing.
Well, the way how I haven't read all the reports, a comprehensive document that
I cheated a bit. There was a lot of co-piloting that went on in that report.
which is a valid use case for the usage, right? But I think like what I have observed, the transformational part here is like that's this multi again. Is we have AI kind of embedded now in the workflow, right? So in the use case of people, but we don't have kind of a I don't know what is kind of this iPhone moment exactly, but is that kind of a AI led intranet where everything's kind of driven by AI? So in any case, like that moment hasn't happened yet, and let's see what the next year will bring.
Well, I think the AI integrations are sort of table stakes for these kind of products now. I think you start to stand out if you don't have something. I think what's more interesting to hear about is the problems that people are solving with this, right? How are scenarios being made more efficient? How are we helping people to get stuff done, answering those kind of, time and budget challenges that people are, genuinely dealing with at the moment? But, it's how are vendors exploring those scenarios is I think that's where the interest will be. What's missing for me though still is, some kind of hugely impactful wow moment in this industry. And I feel like maybe we'll see that in the next couple of years.
Maybe I think the focus has been maybe like now on the technology,
Yeah.
and the one thing that we shouldn't forget is that the challenges that people have in the past, they're still there, right? So the
Yeah.
challenges before AI, they
Yeah.
still remain.
And if anything, becoming more pronounced, the more pressure on being able to fix those challenges because people are exploring Copilot, they are exploring other generative AI tools that are integrating with their work content. And where you've got permissions and oversharing or your data sucks, people will be be having a less optimal experience in using those tools. And I think people are starting to understand that actually there's a good chunk of work that's still needed to make these tools as effective as possible.
Yeah, and again, also like the current trends that people have, they are not just disappearing because we have AI now, right? So they maybe even become like more visible.
Sad face. AI isn't magic.
And SharePoint is not an intranet. Like,
Yes, we're going back to predictions again. And I think something else that we're involved in a lot of conversations with a lot of different customers that time and budgets are under pressure more than ever now. And organizations that have got dedicated teams managing intranets or managing internal comms in some instances still feels like a very rare thing.
it does. Like I was talking like to I have been talking to many clients in the mid-sized market. My observation is that usually there is a one person in the organization, usually marketing or someone in a different role, and that gets kind of this hat of internet manager, and that's a subset of the work that that person has like to perform in general. So I think, and they kind of coming back to the trends that people have. So the more efficient you can make the internet people, that person, the better it is in general, the more successful the person will be then like with the work.
All right, so let's wrap up this episode there. We're going to be back for season 2. We're planning some more interviews, more special guests. We're going to be talking about building intranets in financial services, in legal. We're going to be talking about the increasing use of video, employee happiness. We've got a range of topics that we're going to be covering.
A live episode as well.
Yes. Fresh Perspectives Live. We're going to be trialing that in the coming season as well.
People who are listening would like to join us live, that would be a pleasure. Would be something new. I'm looking forward to that as well.
Well, let's leave it there then. Jarbas, thanks for joining me today and for season 1.
Thank you very much, David, as well. Have a great time.
Cheers.